The truth about extraterrestrials and their relationship to Earth and human beings. Their energy is absolutely exquisite. Grand solar flash, is it almost here? What will the event actually be like? And are you ready for this? In order to get ready, one thing you can do is to question your reality and then change it. ThunderWizard.com is the website that funds this YouTube channel. Please go and check out all of the higher dimensional energy practices, the personal mentorship, spiritual counseling, live Zoom group classes. You can check out the shop for all of the practices that we teach here that give us access to higher dimensions. My books can be found at michaelwilliamdenny.com, including the 2 books I have written about my experiences with extraterrestrials, which is ongoing. It's continued experience. So, as you know, if you've been following the channel, virtually everything that you have been told about extraterrestrials is complete and total nonsense. It is a lie. There has been at least since 1962, there has been a very concerted psyop propaganda about extraterrestrials that have been released on humans ever since. Everything you've seen in movies, everything that you're still seeing, by the way, in all of the news channels, including the so-called alternative ones. Everything that you're hearing is a psyop. All of the so-called experts, all of the so-called former military experts, they're all working for the dark forces. So unless somebody has actual verifiable personal experience, I would not take anything they say literally or take it with a grain of salt. Because once you experience something outside of the 3rd dimension, you realize that it is impossible from within the 3rd dimension to even begin to understand consciousness, let alone extraterrestrials. Because all of the extraterrestrials that are making it to Earth, every single one of them come from higher dimensions. There are no 3rd dimensional ETs coming to Earth. All of the abduction stories you hear, even though there's seemingly very magical sounding things, all of that is 3rd dimensional. What really happens when you get outside of the 3rd dimension is beyond description. So we're going to talk about that. I have my list here, which we are going to go through. So make sure that you stay through the entire video to hear what it is that we're going to be talking about. Now, as you know, I am a contactee of extraterrestrials as well as higher dimensional beings. And so, believe me or don't believe me, that is completely understandable, because what I say is absolutely fantastical. I mean, especially lately, right? However, I have personal experience, and I'm not talking from theory. Some of you, especially if you're newer, but some of you kind of on the fringes of the channel, and by the way, you're all welcome regardless of who you are. I'm glad you're here. But a lot of people will send comments, check out this channel, and I can tell that you haven't spent enough time on my channel to know what my experience is. You haven't read my books, not that you should, but in other words, I can tell when somebody knows my experience or has experienced something similar. Because a lot of people just want to be told what to believe. I mean, you're on my channel, so you want me to tell you what to believe. You go on to somebody else's channel and listen to what they have to say. People will say, well, so-and-so says this. I don't care what so-and-so says. I've experienced it. Now, if I hadn't experienced it, I would care what all the different so-and-sos have to say, because I'd be wanting to figure out what's going on. That's what I do now. trying to research the solar flash event, which unfortunately is virtually impossible to research because everything that I've seen, read, listened to about the solar flash event seems to be coming from complete, total, nonsensical, unbelievable nonsense. So I don't really know. I only know what I believe is coming, and anyway, but that's a whole other video. So we're going to be talking about extraterrestrials, and the reason I'm doing that is because, again, people are dropping comments. Probably you're new to the channel. Again, welcome. And I can tell that you still have some fear. So when it comes to higher dimensional beings and extraterrestrials, fear is a complete waste of time. When it comes to humans, however, you should be afraid of them. Not that you should live in fear. I don't believe that. But if you want to believe that there are beings out there that have very evil, malicious intent towards you, absolutely it is true when it comes to the dark force humans in control of this world. So this is really what's going on. People are taking their instincts. Their instincts are telling them that something seriously diabolical is at work, and we tend to project that, we spiritualize that, and again we take our understanding of the third dimension. Now the dark force humans that are seeking to control you, they're very well aware of this, which is why ever since 1962 there has been a propaganda effort to frighten you, all of the stuff that's been going on since 1962 having to do with aliens and abductions and UFOs and all of that. And by the way, the UFO community, the ufology community, meaning people who go to UFO conferences, and people who write books for UFO conferences. The UFO conferences, that whole thing is completely controlled by this false propaganda. I could get into it, but I'm not going to. If you have any interest in it, I strongly recommend you go to Dr. Stephen Greer's website and look at the thousands, if not tens of thousands, of actual evidence that he has about all this. Go check that out. If you think you're a ufologist and you haven't looked into it, what he says, then you yourself are a hypocrite. Period. You have to at least know what he says. I don't believe him because he's out there and he says stuff. I believe him because my experience lines up with his information 100%. That's how I know he's had the same experiences that I've had. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into what the truth is about extraterrestrials and humans. And hopefully this will give you the desire and the inspiration to have your own experiences. That's the main message here. I have no interest in you believing me. I have no interest in you following me just because I have a YouTube channel and I have some opinions. I have no interest in that. My entire goal is to get you to have an experience. And if you're not doing that as a result of watching my channel, then I have failed in my attempt. So if you want to prevent me from feeling like a failure, I want you to follow through with what I give you to access and to experience. And the easiest way to do that, of course, is on the live guided interdimensional meditations, which we do twice a week. We're going to do another one on Saturday. I needed to take this last Wednesday off because my interdimensional experiences were blowing my mind. Wednesday, it's going to be earlier in the day. It's not going to be at the normal time. It's going to be earlier in the day because we are going to be experiencing a solar eclipse. So the best way to take advantage of solar eclipses is to meditate. And they've been the Vedic mystics and gurus have been saying for thousands of years that when you meditate during an eclipse, the power of the meditation is magnified thousands of times. So we're going to do that. I hope you'll show up for that. I will let you know exactly. You can actually go look and see when the time is of the height of the eclipse, and we'll start probably half an hour before that. So I hope to see you then. I'll put up a video telling you exactly when soon. Right now, what we're going to do is we are going to find out the truth about extraterrestrials and humans. Wouldn't it be nice if this was a selfie that I took? Of course it isn't, but all right, let's go ahead and get into it. So, humans pretending to be ETs abduct humans. ETs never do. If you are watching my channel and you believe that aliens travel to Earth to abduct you and to do experiments on you and to take sexual fluids from you and to create hybrids and torture you, if you believe that, unfortunately you've been lied to. You're believing propaganda. Think about it. Who does these kinds of experiments? There was a political regime in Germany during World War II that did exactly what you hear about. Except the only difference is in alien abductions, you have supposed non-human beings. However, again, if you go to Dr. Greer's website and look at his evidence, you'll find out that all of those aliens are a result of stagecraft. Either they are human beings in suits, or they are AI androids, or they are the result of mental manipulation. There's frequencies that can be pumped into your brain that can make you hear things and see things. And so a lot of times people see aliens that aren't there. I'll give you an example. If you've heard of military abductions, my labs, go look those up. And I remember reading a testimony from a woman who claimed to be a My Lab's abductee, but she says that she used to be abducted by aliens. Until one day, the same thing started happening. Bright flash of light outside of her house. All of a sudden, she was hit with some kind of an energy beam that made her go catatonic, and she couldn't function, she couldn't move, she could barely think. And then the gray aliens started coming down through the ceiling and coming in through the walls, and she knew what was happening. They were going to abduct her, take her to their ship and experiment on her. She knew what was coming because she'd been through this before. But a strange thing happened. As this was happening and the ETs were coming towards her, she heard something that sounded like a mechanical failure, like some sort of mechanical explosion, and the thing stopped, and all of a sudden the ETs faded away, and what was actually there was human military in fatigues. And they stopped, and they realized that something had gone wrong, and they pointed to her like, stay there. And they slowly backed away. She went and looked outside, and instead of seeing a spaceship, she saw Black Hawk helicopter. And these guys got back in their helicopter and flew away. And from that moment on, she, as I understand it, she knew what was really going on. She was never being abducted by aliens. It was human beings. So we could get into that. Dr. Greer has evidence of people who supposedly, in the midst of, again, a failed alien abduction attempt where the guy fought back against the supposed alien, and the alien, fell down, and broke. Like, he fell down and cracked open, and you could see all the hardware, all of the wires, and that it was a mechanical thing. It wasn't an actual beam. So things get a lot more weird and intense, and I'm not going to get into that. But if you believe in all that stuff and you haven't researched it, then you have an emotional agenda to believe this, and you're being used and manipulated. So that is the first thing. Human beings pretending to be ETs abduct humans. ETs never do. Again, let me remind you, extraterrestrials, every single extraterrestrial that is coming to Earth is coming from a civilization on other planets that live in higher frequencies, in higher dimensions. That's why you can't see them. They are completely surrounding this planet. And the only reason you can't see them is because they're in a higher dimension. When you see their ships, and when you see an actual extraterrestrial ship as opposed to the fake alien ships, human beings, by the way, have the technology to create anti-gravitational ships. The Tic Tacs are human-made. The big giant triangle, the pyramids flying around, all those things are human-made. So all this stuff, literally probably 90% or more of all of the UFOs that people film, especially the ones that get onto the on the news channels, those are all human-made. Those are all human black ops military craft. And there, again, you can find that out if you put just the tiniest bit of effort. If you don't put the effort into it, it means you don't want to know the truth. In which case, feel free to stop watching this video and go watch whatever the hell you want. I don't have any more space within me. I have no space in me anymore to tolerate people who allow their fears to drive them. I have no space for it inside of me. So people who have, and I'm talking about people who have an agenda, who want to believe, who get angry with me when I tell them, you have nothing to fear when it comes to extraterrestrials. When people get angry and say, yes, they're out to get us, they're working with the military, they're a part of Satan's this, or, when any kind of that fear, it's obvious they have a need to feel that way so they can avoid their own evolution, their own feelings, and I have no tolerance or space within me for that anymore. So if that's you, you won't hurt my feelings if you go somewhere else. If you want to know the truth, you can listen to what I have to say. Now, I can't prove it. You can choose to believe or not believe me. You do have that right. But hopefully you can see that I am not making up my experiences, and I'm not lying to you. I'm absolutely telling you the truth based on my experiences. Whether that's true or not is a whole other subject. All right, so ETs and higher dimensionals have souls identical to humans. So it's very easy from the third dimensional perspective. Remember what I've said, because I'm a third dimensional being, so I know. Up until 2 years ago, I functioned completely within the third dimension, so I know exactly how humans think. And it's very easy to operate from the assumption that extraterrestrials, whatever they are, once that they don't know us, that they are a different species, they don't have any understanding of what we're about, and they're different from us, and they want to study us and see what we're all about. So anybody who says who says that extraterrestrials come here to study us, you can completely reject everything they have to say, because they have no idea what they're talking about. At best, they are projecting their third dimensional understanding, at best. At worst, they are lying to you. And there's plenty of people out there lying about what this is. So extraterrestrials are no different than you. They have their soul is identical to yours. The only difference is that if they are an extraterrestrial, they have incarnated in a different species body that functions on a higher dimensional plane. Now, let me be clear. I think it is possible, although I don't know, but I think it is very possible that there are third dimensional planets out there similar to ours, but I think if they do exist, it's rare. Because again, in the third dimension, you go looking around, you're not going to see anything. It's just empty space. It's because we're looking into the third dimension of this universe. So we're only going to see what's in the third dimension. You look out there, it's nothing there. It's a ghost town. There's nothing out there. And that's because third dimensional consciousness is very rare. And so there might be other third dimensional consciousness experiments on other planets. And we'll talk about what I mean by that. It's not an experiment like they're being experimented on. No, it's those souls. So every single human being has come here by choice. You are a higher dimensional being in your true essence. You don't remember, but that's part of the experiment. And you said, I want to go into that video game and I want to learn about how to manifest from my soul. I really want to go in difficult circumstances and learn. You want big muscles, you got to go to the gym and push weights until it hurts. You got to go into some place where there's a lot of pressure and you have to work against it. That's the only way that you can learn and grow. You came here to learn and grow. So if there are other third dimensional worlds out there, it's for that. And the third dimensional Earth, I think I'm safe to say that 3D Earth is the most difficult experiment you can go through in terms of manifestation. I might be wrong about that, but if I am, I'm sure there's maybe one or two. I mean, there might not even be any others. So, you are living in a ghost town. The third dimension is completely isolated from the rest of the higher dimensions. And so, everything you think you know about reality is based on a very, very isolated experience. And that includes people's assumptions about extraterrestrials. Because you're projecting onto these beings what humans do. Humans find a new land and they find an animal they don't understand. They've never seen that. What do? They take it and they put it in a laboratory and they experiment on it. They take it captive. They learn about it. They study it. So it's only logical that you would expect that that's what higher dimensional beings would do. That they would do exactly what we do. Well, that assumes that we live in what's called base reality. Go look that up. What is base reality? Base reality means this is the base reality is the fundamental truth. What if that's not the case? Again, if you're living in an illusion, if you're living in a video game, then this isn't base reality. So it'd be like trying to base our 3D reality off of the rules that happen inside of video games. That would be ridiculous. So it's just as ridiculous for you to assume that how things work here is how all beings are. No, all extraterrestrial beings have souls identical to humans. They have the same feelings. They look at you not as something different. They look at you as one of their family. If I have a friend who's got, I don't have hair anymore. But when I did, back before I started getting gray hairs, I had jet black hair. Except when it was in the summer and I let my hair grow, then it would turn sort of brown and reddish. But I had friends who had blonde hair, friends who had brown hair, friends who had brown eyes, green eyes, blue eyes. I had friends that had different shades of color on their skin. I didn't care. I felt they were identical to me. You simply have a different meat suit that you wear. This guy has this meat suit, but he's one of my best friends. And he's identical to me in the way that he thinks and he feels. He's in a higher dimension, so his emotions are more intense than mine. But in terms of wanting to be loved, wanting to be happy, wanting other people to be happy, wanting the people that you love to be happy, wanting to help, they're as human as anybody else. So the idea that they would come and experiment on you is absolutely preposterous. But you don't know that if you've never experienced it. You're stuck in the third dimension. So ETs and higher dimensionals have souls identical to humans. So higher dimensionals, I've heard people flip out, because now there's some propaganda out there that higher dimensional beings are evil, and then they're equating them with demons. Again, let's talk about what dimensions are. So lots of times people will say a being from another dimension. Well, a dimension is something far different than an alternate universe or an alternate world. Movies, in fact, conflate these terms all the time. They'll say, we went through a wormhole and we're in an alternate dimension, but it'll be exactly like the dimension they were in. It's the third dimension. It's exactly the same. Maybe some of the details are different. What they're talking about is an alternate universe. So there's no shortage of alternate universes within the third dimension, which means you walk around with the same way you do now. You function the same way. There's up, down, left, right. That's the third dimension. You live in a box. When you get into a higher dimension, things completely shift, and there's a whole other direction. Again, two-dimensional beings, they know backwards and forwards and left and right, and that's it. If you try and tell a two-dimensional being about up or down, they literally cannot imagine it because it doesn't exist in their reality. Higher dimensional beings, like my friend here, they live in higher dimensions, so they have a completely other scenario going on that is far beyond anything we can imagine, and so stop trying because you won't be able to figure it out. However, if you experience it, you feel it, you will come back with experiences that nobody else will understand. Again, this is how I can tell. I can tell within the first few words whether or not somebody has actually experienced higher dimensional beings, higher dimensional extraterrestrials in any real depth. I can tell almost immediately. This is why I don't believe in 99.9% of all those who claim to channel extraterrestrials, the vast majority of so-called experts talking about ETs and all of that, because they say things that are impossible, like ETs are working with government officials and there are good ETs and bad ETs, and that there's galactic wars against the Draconians and the Arcturians. Anybody who talks like that has never been outside of the third dimension. And that's just a fact. If you've been outside of the third dimension and you've experienced those higher dimensional, just what it's like to merge with a mind in a higher dimension, you never, ever, ever doubt that anything outside of the third dimension has anything but love. The only people that think that are people who've never been there or are lying to you, which of course they've never been there. So ETs and higher dimensionals have souls identical to humans. All conscious beings operate from empathy, the golden rule. Again, you're being told that beings come to Earth and they have different understandings and different morals. When I first started having my experiences, I started looking for communities online to talk with people, and I found some Facebook group of some guy. He was doing CE5s, but he claimed to channel the tall whites. By the way, that never existed. There was one guy who claimed to have lived among tall white aliens who worked with human governments near Area 51. And that guy turned out to be a fraud. You do the tiniest bit of research into it, you'll find out he's a complete fraud. But this CE5 group claimed to channel them. Of course, when they had their CE5 attempts to communicate with the tall whites, they never saw any ET craft because they don't exist. But people would make things up, or they would have delusions and they would say, I talked to him and this is what they said. And this is the problem with this, because when we're dealing with spiritual experiences, it's real easy to be deluded, to conflate, to imagine. I know. So the point I was trying to make is that this guy was teaching some course, and one of the course lessons had to do with extraterrestrial morality, and he was going to pontificate about how their morality was different than ours. And basically he was going to justify their abuse, probably justify abductions and other ridiculous things like that. So I'm here to tell you that their morality is no different than human beings who operate from a spiritual moral place. Now, their morality is not the same as the psychopathic, evil humans that live in this world. I'm talking about good people. And all good people have the same morality, and it's the golden rule. It's real simple. The golden rule is to treat others the way you would want to be treated. Don't do anything to anybody else that would be hurtful to you. That's it. That is the same in every single dimension, in every single society, in every single civilization. Love is the same. Empathy is the same. Compassion is the same. And empathy, by the way, is seeing yourself in other people. And so this is how God works. And all conscious beings come from what you can call God, the source spirit. You come from that same thing. It's all the same. And we are all part of a family. And if you don't understand that, well, that's okay. But you can absolutely 100% reject anybody out there who says anything different than that. They think they're going to tell you that beings from Zeta Reticuli travel hundreds of thousands of light years to Earth just so that they can anally probe you and implant you. And, well, it's different because they have different morality than us. No, that's a lie. Absolute, complete, total lie. All conscious beings operate from empathy, the golden rule. In higher dimensional frequencies, war, violence, hatred is impossible. There are no intergalactic wars. There's no such thing as, the evil draconians fighting against the good Arcturians. This is third dimensional thinking. Anybody who thinks this way is a third dimensional being, at best conflating and projecting. In between, they're deluded, they're projecting their fears onto it, which happens all the time. Or they're con people, they're lying to you. Or they're deep state operatives. But it's absolutely not the case. There is nothing outside of the third dimension. There's no such thing as Star Wars. None of that stuff is going on. Outside of the third dimension, understand that my friend here, this being, if there's and I'm sure there are beings that look like this beautiful feminine being, because I've interacted with them, and everything in between. There's all kinds of beings. Some of them look like cats. Some of them look like insects. Some of them look exactly like humans, but they don't have ears. Some of them look very different. Some of them look a lot like the so-called grays. And there's all different kinds of beings all over the place. Short, tall, all different kinds. But they are exactly the same internally. They feel exactly the same way you do. And their identity is not based in how they look. My friend's exterior body that he carries with him is simply the meat suit that he wears. And he's chosen to be incarnated in that form for reasons I don't know, but I know one of them is because these beings are very powerful Qigong practitioners. They have very powerful energy, and so their body gives them nervous systems to be able to channel high degrees of energy. There are other beings that are very ethereal. They don't really have a physical body. So they've incarnated in those bodies for specific reasons, but the soul inside of those bodies are the same. And when they look at you, they see a soul. They identify with you as their family member. They don't see the differences. Is that clear? Third dimensional beings do, because we actually function in two dimensions. I won't take the time to do that. We live in third dimensional reality, but we function in two dimensions. Two dimensions is that. It's dualistic. Up, down, right, wrong, good, bad, happy, sad, I love you, I hate you. This is two dimensions. So we see the differences. We operate from the differences, and we project onto these beings that they must operate from these dualistic differences, and they don't, because they're not third dimensional beings. All right. So war, violence, hatred is impossible. 3D Earth is an isolated lower frequency that is not similar to higher dimensions. I've already said this. Again, people talk about other dimensions, and unless they understand that once you shift up to a higher dimension, everything changes. Your physical reality becomes completely unrecognizable. If you were in the third dimension to shift up to the fourth dimension, you would be completely incapable of interpreting what you were seeing. You don't have the hardware to do it. And if you did, it would be so bizarre it might completely freak you out. You know, a lot of people, when they take DMT, which, by the way, when you interact with higher dimensions, DMT is naturally released when you meditate, when you sleep, when you have sex, when you're born, when you die. So when people artificially ingest it, which I do not recommend, it is very destructive. It ruins your brain's ability to create DMT organically and naturally, so please don't do it. But when people do that, one of the things that they say is that they don't understand what they're seeing. Or they'll look, in the beings that they interact with sometimes look like, you know, frightening clowns, you know, and you know, everything is just distorted. It's because they're looking into a higher dimension and they don't have the capability of understanding what they're experiencing. By the way, most beings, when you show up, you know, because you've taken DMT and you show up in their dimension, they're like, what the hell are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. Because you're sort of, you know, you're cheating. A lot of times they're very happy and nice. Oh, it's you, good to see you. But lots of times they'll go, you're not supposed to be here. So, you know, I believe I've been shown a glimpse of that. And I remember, you know, in one of my meditations when I was worrying and wondering, you know, what is this dimensional stuff about? I very briefly saw a being, but everything was distorted. You know, like, you know, it's like looking at somebody with, you know, a fisheye lens where everything is just distorted, and so it was frightening to me. It's because I didn't have, you know, fourth or fifth dimensional eyeballs to see what was going on. And so, but I appreciated it because I believe I was allowed to see that so that I would understand everything's completely different in these other dimensional realms. So anybody who starts talking about higher dimensions and doesn't bring that into it doesn't know what they're talking about. Very few people do. I'm going to say something that's I mean, I've already said so many things that are so incredibly, just unbelievably grandiose and fantastical. So, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? I don't believe that anybody, including all of the spiritual masters, all of the rishis, all of the writers of various scriptures, I don't believe that any of them have been outside of the third dimension. Yeah. I mean, I haven't, you know, I've studied a lot of scriptures and, you know, there's a lot of truth in all of them, but I've never seen anybody who explained anything that gave me the understanding that they've been outside of this third dimension. So this third dimensional reality, this experiment, this laboratory, for the first time in history, human beings are being allowed outside of it. I've shared this before, but I'll share it again because it bears repeating. I'm not the only person that has had this experience. Other people who are doing interdimensional meditation have said similar things, that we're the first. So up until this point in time, it is my firm belief that human beings in the third dimension, no matter how deep they go spiritually, never leave the third dimension. And they haven't been allowed to. If they actually end up leaving the third dimension, they don't get to come back. So people who have had near-death experiences, very often they will have an experience where they go to what they know to be an interim like heaven. And it's understandable. When they describe it, it sounds like a very nice, wonderful, higher frequency, third dimensional place. It doesn't sound like higher dimensions. It sounds like really happy, higher third dimensional place. And in that place, they will meet with beings, whether it's Jesus or Buddha or a light being or their parents or grandparents or something like that, who will give them a life review. And they will go through the life review, and then sometimes they will be given a choice. They will sense there will be a barrier or a door or something, and on the other side of that, they will sense that, wow, the really cool stuff is on the other side of that door. And they'll want to go through it, and they'll be given a choice. They'll be saying, wait, you can either go through that door, or you can choose to go back and finish out this life. But if you go through that door, you won't be able to go back. And of course, all the ones that come back are the ones that didn't go through the door, so they can't tell us what's on the other side. I've been on the other side of that. And I can tell you that it is virtually impossible to come back and function here after being on the other side of that door, because the other side of that door is remembering your higher dimensional identities and experiences. And once you get to that, there's literally nothing in the third dimension that interests you anymore. And you can't function. So if you have karma left to work through in this life, you won't be able to do it. And the reason why I've been able to go beyond it, as well as other people, is because this third dimensional experiment is going away. There's no reason. There's no reason for me to be able to interact with this third dimensional consensus, because there's nothing left to accomplish. The whole thing is coming apart. That's what the Mandela effect is. The Mandela effect is that the thing's coming apart. We can't even remember our past correctly. It means that the illusion is we're starting to see the illusion. This is why the dark forces have completely lost control, and they have no ability to continue to lie to people and control them anymore, because in order for that to work, the third dimensional experience has to be intact, and it's not. It's fallen apart. So, where'd that come from? So, three-dimensional Earth is an isolated lower frequency that is not similar to higher dimensions. All right. Anunnakis are not aliens. Please stop putting in the comments about Enki and Enlil and whoever else. I mean, maybe you haven't been on my channel long enough to know, and of course it's okay for you to have whatever experience you've had. You're not required to master my channel to be here. This is my thing, but just know that anybody who talks about Anunnakis as being aliens is learning. All you have to do is just Wikipedia Zachariah Sitchin. That's the guy who first started talking about Anunnakis being aliens. And it's because he's completely, totally misinterpreted Sumerian mythology. I've made some videos about it. And I believe it's a psyop because it creates fear. And again, the whole point of that whole Anunnaki alien thing is to tell you that human beings were created in a lab by extraterrestrials, which means if that's true, you don't have a soul and you're screwed. So if you want to believe that you're a spiritual person, you can't believe in spirituality and believe in the Anunnaki ancient alien nonsense. So pick one. Are you a soulless NPC, or are you an actual human? If you're a human being with a soul, then please reject that, because it's all false nonsense anyway. Anunnakis, however, remember that the Sumerian mythology was written long after an empire had been created. And the point of empires is for elites to have tremendous power enslaving other humans. So in the Sumerian mythology, the deities are said to have taken the blood of one of the other slain deities and used it to create humans to serve them. So that has nothing to do with aliens, but that is saying that the gods did this. So they're saying that the gods created humans as mindless slaves. Now, bear in mind that back then, right now, the way that the deep state confuses you and programs you is through television, movies, news, social media. Before that, it was religion. It was monotheist religion. Before that, if you go back to the empires, it was mythology. So the mythology that's written by the Sumerians was so completely thwarted. Remember, by the time it was written down, the Sumerian empires had existed for thousands of years. So those of you who think you're getting some really cool ancient book that tells the truth, no, you're looking at so far the post-Diluvian, which means after the flood, the first written mythology after the flood, and it was written by human beings who were running an empire. So the way to control and hypnotize people back then, the social media back then, the television back then, the news back then, was mythology. So the mythology was that you're a human being, you were created by the gods to please us. And then you'll find out later that the kings of certain city-states were actually deities. So it has nothing to do with spirituality, it has everything to do with controlling people. So drop everything that you've read about and you think you know about Sumerian mythology, Enki and Enlil and all that. I'm telling you, it's all been so, even if you take the mythology as written, it's designed to put you in a position so that you're willing to be controlled and enslaved. So drop all of it, please. I've made some videos about that. You can watch those. So Anunnakis are not aliens. They are humans in ancient elite mythology projecting their own fantasies about what they want you to believe. By the way, that same fantasy, the reason why the Anunnaki, ancient alien human beings, were bred in a laboratory for the Anunnakis, that has been twisted to fit modern times. That's why it's so popular. That's why it's on the History Channel. The History Channel. The History Channel is as mainstream as you get. Why do you think it's on there? Why do you think mainstream media, television, puts on this nonsense when they know it's historically and linguistically inaccurate? The History Channel, trust me, they know that the Zecharia Sitchin translations are completely inaccurate. So why would they knowingly put that out? Just for entertainment? No, it's a way of hypnotizing. So please drop all that nonsense, please. And stop giving me links to this garbage, please. If you care about me at all and my sanity, stop it. All right, you can believe whatever the heck you want, but there's plenty of other channels to go to if you want to listen to that nonsense. Let's see. ETs are not working with any human governments or military. Again, that is a lie. Complete lie. No truth to it at all. And again, if you experience higher dimensional ETs, you will know that. Now, when I first started communicating with these beings, one of the first things that happened is I started being brought and introduced to these different councils. There was a Council of Nine. A lot of people talk about the Council of Nine. I'd never heard of it. Again, I'm in interdimensional meditation and I'm introduced and they say, we are the Council of Nine. And I think to myself, that sounds really made up. But I've experienced all, there's councils and groups and, different hiring levels of very powerful beings, and they come together as groups and they make decisions and they do stuff and they make stuff, and it's just part of how the entire multiverse of consciousness works. It's very fascinating and interesting. And apparently I'm a member of in my higher dimensional self, a member of multiple councils, as it turns out, as you probably are as well. Because if you're a human being, you're a very powerful deity, so very likely you're very high up in the higher dimensional being hierarchy. Let's see, what was I talking about? So ETs are not working with any human governments or military. So this is a little bit different, but it's still in the same ballpark. So let me throw out an assumption here for you. So in order to function with government or military, by doing so, you're actually accepting the validity of such organizations. So let's be clear. Governments are not things. They don't exist independently. They are made up by humans. Country borders are made up. Money is made up. It's a completely intellectual concept. So the idea of a human government on planet Earth is a made-up concept. From the higher dimensional experience, there's Earth, and Earth is a being. And Earth is populated by humans, higher dimensional souls who are incarnated as humans. So they see the Earth as where humans live. And we are all related. And so it's not like you have different councils or different, clubs. The idea of countries and governments are made up. They're not real things that exist independently. So the idea that a higher dimensional being who sees the truth, when they look at the Earth, they see a being. We would call her a goddess. They see a being who has on her all of these other souls that are interacting and working out karma and all of that. That's what they see. They don't see the third dimensional nonsense that we've created and made up. They don't see it. They know that we see that and we function that way. It's not that they're blind to it, but they don't see it, that it has any real power. So the idea that they would align themselves with a government is ridiculous. Again, they've watched governments come and go. They've watched countries come and go. They've watched, 13,000 years ago, the entire Earth was, human civilization was wiped out and started all over again. And it's probably happened multiple times, and they've seen that. They know that history. So they're not impressed by, the United States government that's been around for a couple hundred years. They're not impressed by that. They don't have any need to kowtow to a government to work with them. They are operating from a spiritual perspective, not on a 3D human perspective. So anybody that tells you that, again, this is the fantasy of the dark force elites who want to be so powerful that they tell you, we're working with the Arcturians. We're working with God. It used to be in religion, it was God. Because the Bible said, obey your leaders. And, divine right, if you've gone to school, you know what that is. It's, like the European kings, if you couldn't, there was no such thing as democracy. The idea of somebody electing, a king was ridiculous because a king was placed there by God. And so only your children would be placed on the throne by divine right. God has given you the right to rule over these people. Well, that's ridiculous. Absolutely, utterly ridiculous. So the idea of, a higher dimensional spiritual being working with somebody who's placed themselves in the position of God on earth, and hasn't earned it in any way and just uses it to control and get rich off of other people's labor. They're not interested in that. Why would they align themselves with that? And that's just on the third dimensional understanding of spirituality. And higher dimensional awarenesses, it's so far beyond ridiculous that they're not going to do that. They will work with you if you are spiritually open to working with them. They'll come to you. They're not going to. What are they going to do? They're going to land on the White House lawn and say, "Hi, take me to your leader." It's nonsense, because whoever is there is completely, totally, spiritually out of the loop. They're not connected. They don't have any power. Well, it's one thing we've learned by doing these guided interdimensional meditations is that power has absolutely nothing to do with third dimensional consensus power. Nothing whatsoever. Real power is far beyond anything that happens in the third dimensional human consensus. So please get rid of that idea. It's absolutely preposterous. You know, when I was first interacting with them, again, I had a lot of three-dimensional understandings, and I said, wow, you guys are so powerful. I'm just checking this out, but, I have to do this thing where I have to make money to pay bills, and it takes a lot of my time, and, we worry about this stuff down here. I said, can you guys just, manifest, a big stack of cash for me, and then I don't have to worry about it? And I literally made like a request, like I sent that out up the channel to the councils. I wanted somebody to come and give me, a message. And sure enough, a council member showed up. He was one of the ones that looked human. I think he even had a beard. And he, and I'm doing my best to quote what he said. He said, "You realize we can't get involved with that, right? We can't get involved with that. In other words, the money is made up nonsense. We can't get involved in that." So they're not going to get involved in governments either. It's ridiculous. These are beings that have the ability to fly over, and they've done this. Higher dimensional ETs have flown over nuclear facilities, and they have turned on all of the nuclear weapons and, started the countdown and then shut it off. Because they're just saying, we can turn this on or turn this off. You don't have any control over what we do. Human beings have sent nuclear weapons out into space. They were going to test them. They were going to test one on the moon by blowing one up on the moon. And as soon as they sent the rocket out, a orb showed up, an alien ship showed up, and they, they lopped the thing off. They just completely, totally, and the nuclear warhead fell into the ocean. These beings have absolutely zero need to interact with these false governments run by evil people. They have zero need to do that. They're not doing it. I hope I've made myself clear. So anybody who talks like that, you can forget everything that they've said. Humans were not created by aliens. All conscious life is self-created. So again, if you believe in the Anunnaki nonsense, that aliens have come to Earth and manipulated genetics to create humans, then you don't believe that you have a soul, and you are choosing to believe that you are a slave. You're worse than a slave. You think you're being spiritual. I'm into ufology. I'm into UFOs. And Anunnakis came and they created humans. They interbred and they took it. Now, these things do go on in human laboratories. They have shot down alien craft. By the way, there's never been an alien crash. There's no such thing as a higher dimensional extraterrestrial ship that goes through wormholes and shows up at Earth and then, oops, I forgot how to drive and I crashed because we got hit by lightning. That stuff never happens. That stuff never happens. What does happen is that human beings have invented very powerful weapons that you haven't heard of that do have the ability to shoot down extraterrestrial craft. If they allow themselves to come into the third dimension, they become vulnerable. They can be shot down. So human beings have shot down, I don't even know how many, but as I understand from Dr. Greer's evidence, quite a few. And there have been alien bodies that have been taken and have been used and are currently being used and experimented on. And one of the experiments they do, human-alien hybrids. And it's horrific. It is absolutely monstrously horrific what they are doing. So that is a real thing. Aliens doing it, again, they have zero need to do that. That would be like, a parent who loves their child, taking their child that they love and going and experimenting on it. It's absolutely unheard of. Your fellow spiritual light being family members have absolutely no desire whatsoever and no need. They have no need to experiment. There's nothing dying on their planet. Their planet isn't dying, because then that means that they're not connected to the spirit energy that creates planets. That creates, they're not like us. They're not fighting against their physical reality like we are. They're in complete tune with all of that. And I've learned as a result of being with them that all matter has life. The moon is a being. The sun is a very wonderful, beautiful being. And I call her my mother because she is. She's your mother too, by the way. All of the rocks, all of the plants, all of the mountains, the trees, everything has a soul and a consciousness and communicates. And, when you have that kind of awareness, you don't do things like experiment on people. You don't do things like create hybrids. You don't do that. So please drop all of that nonsense. If you're believing that, you're being lied to. 99.999% of everything out there having to do with aliens, ETs, higher dimensions is at best mistaken and at worst is a lie. So humans were not created by aliens. All conscious life is self-created. One of the reasons I believe that I've been revealed my past life and all the things that I've shared with you is so that you'll see yourself that way. I know that now because I've become awakened to my higher dimensional lives. And I know that the idea that I was created in a lab is absolutely ridiculous. I know for a fact I created myself. I know for a fact that I helped to create this world. I know for a fact that I helped to create humans. So did you. This is your creation. So everything in it you had a say in. You were in meetings with other light beings, figuring out what kind of plants and animals and what the laws of physics would be. You created all of that. You made decisions on the kind of bodies that human beings would eventually have. If there is such a thing as evolution, then you had a part in that, in helping for life to evolve into a form that the soul could live in. Assuming, I'm not saying that's how it was, but assuming that's what happened, you had a part in that. So please love yourself and have enough respect for yourself to know that nothing outside of you created you. You created yourself. You are God. You did this. Please drop all of the nonsense. So humans were not created by aliens. All conscious life is self-created. Human mythology is influenced by human 3D experience, which as I talked about before. Some mythologies, like if you go to the most primitive ones, and by that I mean societies that didn't live in empires. So remember that empires are run by elites who need you to become a slave. So let me, just to give you one example, let me give you an example of one empire. They all end up doing this. Doesn't matter. This is how all empires come into being. In the third dimension after the flood, at least. So the Greek, right? The Greeks are a very ancient people. Very ancient Indo-European people that have been in that region for a very long time. Thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So they, like everybody else on the planet, lived in connection with the earth. At some point they were hunter-gatherers. They went out and they hunted for food, or they gathered for food, and they had to function with the seasons. And so the religions that they intuited had to do with flowing with the seasons and flowing with the elements and flowing with the spirits of nature. That's, any mythology that comes from that, you can pretty much bank on. because it's about that, interacting and being part of a much greater web that you have. This is why, the farther you go back in the past, people had magical powers. Then the third dimensional religions came along and people stopped having magical powers. But you have magical powers because you're a magical being in a magical land. And you live in connection with all of these forces, right? So the Greeks were just like everybody else. And then what ended up happening is that they started to farm. And they figured out pretty quick, just like the Sumerians before them, they figured out pretty quick that, we can grow lots of grains. We can grow lots of crops. That makes things a lot easier. I don't have to go spend all day out there gathering, and I don't have to hunt as much. I've got all this food. But then they started having more food that they could possibly eat. So they had to store the grain, because what ends up happening? The crows come and the animals come and they eat the grains. And, we got all this grain. So wealth was resources, right? So they had all this grain. So they built silos to put the grain in. And then what ends up happening? Other hunter-gatherers are like, those guys got a shit ton of grain, man. I'm hungry. I don't want to go gathering. I don't want to go hunting. They don't need all that. So what happened? People started stealing grain from these other people. So now they don't have time to do all this farming. So what do they got to do? They got to build, they have to have soldiers. So they have to create an army to guard the grain. And then they build these cities with walls, and they live inside the city, and that's where they go off on philosophy and art, because they got all this food. They don't have to go out and make, get their food. They've got all these farms. But now all the farmers are walking around with swords and shields, and they can't farm. So what do they got to do? They got to go and conquer the other tribes around them. And if you know anything about the Greeks, especially the what are they called? The other guys. Anyway, they had slaves, and they conquered the people around them. And then the people they conquered were the people that ended up tilling all the soil in the field. It sounds exactly like medieval Europe. This is how empires are built. There are people in walls that have everything and don't need anything, and they want you to do all the work for them while they sit back and ponder and eat and paint their nails and paint their faces and whatever else they do. So what was my point about that? My point about that was that human mythology, when you start to get into mythology that is created by empires, which, mythology then morphed into religion. And then religion is morphed into what it is now, which is mainstream, television and books and colleges and, all that stuff now. So anyway, human mythology is influenced by 3D human experience. That has to do with the whole Annunaki thing. The whole Annunaki thing is, and again, I beat that horse to death, but now you know what I'm talking about. So the only way to begin to understand ETs and higher dimensional beings is through experience. This is the most important thing. There was no way I could have known what I know now. Absolutely no way I could have intuited. And I was pretty good. I was pretty smart. I had good observation skills. I had good intuitive skills. I've got good critical thinking skills. I intuited and understood a lot of things through observation, and it turns out my observations and my thinking was right in a lot of ways. Spiritually, I've proven that. But the things that I've seen and experienced, and there's no way I could have figured that out on my own. There's no possible way. I had to have had experienced it, and I needed beings from higher dimensions to give me that connection. Without that, I wouldn't understand any of the things that I do. So this is why it doesn't hurt my feelings if people don't believe me, because why should you? I wouldn't have believed me either. I still am struggling to believe the things that I have been shown about this reality and myself and my past lives and just my essence. Anyway, I can go on and on and on about that. So the whole point of this, again, as I said earlier, is for you to have your own personal experiences. The attitude that works is, I want to know the truth more than I want to be comfortable. Now, I have connections and communications with higher dimensional beings and extraterrestrial beings almost on a daily basis. And that is because I really made the decision that I wanted that to happen. The first time that I did CE5, I didn't consciously experience everything, even though I've got video evidence that ETs showed up, lights, communications. I've got voices recorded, lights recorded, all kinds of things, but I didn't see it. But I was absolutely committed. I said, I'm not going to give up until I prove to myself one way or another what this whole ET thing is. And it wasn't until my third CE5 experience, after going to that and saying, putting the message out there, I want this more than I want my own life. I'm willing to die, if that's what it takes, to experience this. Because, if you guys exist, I have to know. So, I was totally committed to that. And they responded, and they gave me an incredible shamanic initiation, which lasted for, it's still going on 2.5 years later. So that's the attitude. If you're having a hard time having the experiences, just really be committed that you're willing to have it, and you're willing to experience it more than you're willing to be comfortable. Now, my experience in hindsight was that experience with that actually began the destruction of my third dimensional self. So I really did begin to die on a spiritual level, in the same way that Odin sacrificed himself on the tree of life. So you've got to be willing to go through a shamanic death. The more experience you have, the more death is going to happen, and the more experience you have, the less able you're going to be able to do this third dimensional thing. That's my experience anyway. All right, so I've gone through all of my list. I've said everything I want to say probably 2 or 3 times over. So that's it, my friends. I wish you all the best. Again, thunderwizard.com is the website that funds this channel. If you appreciate this channel, you can just click on the $sign that will, you can support the channel that way. The best way is to subscribe at thunderwizard.com. Subscribe there at whatever level. Free doesn't do anything. I know a lot of people subscribe for free. I know a lot of times you have to if you buy something from the shop. But the best way to keep this going is the recurring monthly subscription. That's what keeps food in my refrigerator. So that's the best way to support the channel. Now, my hope is we won't need to do this perhaps very soon. Maybe in the next couple of weeks we might get to leave this reality, but I'm not gonna bank on that. All right, that's it. Thank you guys so much. I love you all. Remember, you are the most powerful being that's ever existed, and the only thing that you're required to do to be completely loved is just to exist. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. In fact, there's nothing else you can do which will make you more lovable than you already are. And if you spend all of your effort focused on giving yourself the deepest joy that your soul wants, selfishly make your soul happy. If you do that, all conscious beings will evolve, and the gods themselves will get on their knees and will worship you and give you everything that you desire. That's it, my friends. I love you all. I'll see you all very soon. Please take very good care of yourselves.